So since we now have a 9-year anniversary NAT-5 Summit event, a lot of people have been asking me to do a NAT-5 tier list like we did with the 4 stars and the second awakened units. So today, that is what we have. So just like we did with the 4-star tier list, we separated everything up into 5 different tier lists, one for each element, because it just makes it easier to see. That way we can go through it there, and then at the very end it's just a chaotic, all the NAT-5s everywhere tier list where it's hard to see unless you're looking at the very top or the very bottom, because there's just a jumble of units in the middle. So like I said, let's get it started with the fire ones first. Also, just to mention that this was all voted on by you guys, and I just tallied the scores into where these different units fell based on your votes from the community tab, and it's just a Google Forms poll that everyone did. So some of these I personally disagree with. Some things I think could be higher or lower based on my personal usage or my personal preferences. But for the most part, I mean, for players that are either returning or are new, this is a good rule of thumb for a lot of people to know what is more useful than others. I think this is kind of skewed towards RTA. I didn't tell people vote for any specific vote based on RTA or Guild Wars or Siege or Arena or anything. I just let everyone decide things for themselves on where they thought the units were in a general sense of how strong these things can be in Summoner's War. But looking at the lists, I feel like it's kind of maybe a little bit more on the RTA side than anything else, because there's things that could be pretty decent in this poor puppeteer, man. C tier. I was surprised that people put her in C tier. Not that I think she's an amazing unit. I had some pushback when I was like, I don't really like her, and people were like, no, you just don't appreciate them. I'm like, okay, but it turns out I'm not the only one that doesn't appreciate her, I guess. These are very strong units, mostly in RTA, but they can be strong in other areas as well. Interesting to see. Toxic unit. I think for the most part, it's fairly accurate. I think Carlos, I feel might be a little bit low. I also have my personal, like, John performs really well for me. And Carlos, I think, is such a nasty unit after his buff. But for the most part, I think everything is in a decent spot here. So then we have, we don't have any triple S's for the fire ones. Next, we have the water ones. We have Wusa, Moore, and Shizuka, all triple S unit. I'm kind of a little surprised that I personally would have voted things a little bit differently. But again, just based on my playstyle, I see that there's it looks like most of the fire ones are around the A tier. Most of the water ones are around the A tier as well. I did notice that as soon as we get to the LDs, things are generally considered a little bit better, but I don't know if maybe people that don't own the units are just like, oh, I lost to this like 7 times in RTA, so I'm going to rank this better. I would maybe, like, I don't know that these are triple S tier necessarily. But again, this is not my votes. So I think for the most part, a lot of things are maybe 80 to 90% of the things are probably where I think they should be. But I do disagree with some of these things. Like, some of the units in A tier are better, in my opinion, than some of the units in S tier. For me personally, like, I don't get crazy about Molong, but I do get crazy about Alicia, and I do get crazy about this guy's pretty good after his buffs. He was so doo-doo. He was so doo-doo at the very beginning. The Water Weapon Master, when he first came out, he was like some stages of TOA hell. But with the buff, I think he's a really great unit now. Also, I like some of these units quite a bit. So that's just personal preferences, though. And then you see, I don't know. I would put things in different spots, but again, this is a community tier list, not just. Because some of these units are really... whatever. It's a community tier list, not just my tier list. Then this kind of makes me feel more... Because this is mostly an RTA unit, right? More than anything else, you're not really going to be using them in like Dragon's B12. I mean, you could put him on... You could use him in Arena. Some people use him in Arena, but... just regular Arena. But... or like Guild's content, he's without the speed lead. Because the speed lead's only for Arena. So... without that speed lead for guild content, I'm sure some people use him, but he tends to lose a lot of value as soon as you take that speed lead out of consideration. So yeah, Leo is just fantastic in most places, and Leo can also carry someone with due to runes. I appreciate that Riley is here in triple S tier. I feel, here's my thoughts, is that some of these units at triple S tier or at double S tier or higher on the tier lists, it seems like it's not that they're the best units. It seems like they have just created the most traumatic experience for the people that voted them at those tiers. It's like people have lost to Oliver in very painful ways. So they're like, okay, I'm just doing triple S tier, triple S tier, triple S tier. Riley, I'm sure Riley has soloed people. She shouldn't be soloing people, but I'm sure people have been soloed by Riley or has been very frustrating experiences with some of these units. So I'm sure that's why they're putting these things in triple S tier. But it just feels like more than anything else, just something like that. I think there's so many people using Pungback right now. I think that people might not be appreciating. And Hathor, obviously, she fell off. Some of these units, though, I think are not appreciated enough. Rip these C tier. 3 C tier units. There's nothing else. There's D tier and F tier. Some people voted some of these units in D or F, but it was such a low amount of votes that you can't be like, oh, just because 13 people voted this in, I'm just making up a number right now, 13 people voted this in F tier, gonna make it F tier for everyone. It's like, no, we're taking the average of a lot of votes, not just those 13 people. Why do I keep saying 13? I don't know. But yeah, so we'll go to the light ones next. So light ones, we notice, is significant difference from, we see a lot of S tier units now, not just clustered in A tier for the most part, because we see a lot of S tier units here, but we see a big clustering of A tier, but then as soon as you get to the light ones, I'm also a little bit surprised by some of these. Well, I guess, okay, so one of the things that surprised me was the light demon, but if you take into consideration all of the different modes in the game, like, he's pretty good in Rift Beast, so he's very good in Rift Beast, actually. So that's one of the reasons that he's up that high. Whereas if this was just RTA only, that would be a different story, right? But for the most part, I think this is kind of skewed mostly to RTA, but I didn't say skew it to anything. I'm just saying. I think it's kind of skewed towards, can you guys even see? You guys saw these ones fine, right? For whatever reason, the light one is a little bit different. But, yeah, there you go. Some of these personally, I mean, if you take ISIS for like arena offense or like TOA, if someone's struggling with TOA hard, this could be, or TOA hell, whatever. ISIS could be really, really, really strong in certain situations. Also for arena offense, she does AoE Oblivion. She is one unit that does AoE Oblivion on everything. So, pretty strong unit in certain instances, but you can't always stick her in everywhere, right? So again, I think it's mostly skewed towards RTA, but you do have to take into consideration all of the different modes in the game. And then we have some I think that some of these B tier, like this is actually not B tier. This is not B tier because Beans has this and we played with it on video and it wasn't like we had to, after the buff, it wasn't like we had to like force it into matches. So also, being a Shazam owner, I feel that these, like some of these I just don't agree with on the tier. Like Celia and Shazam, I can genuinely bring Shazam into a lot of places and he works just fine. Celia, not quite so much. Not quite so much. I think that she'll get a buff soon to be something. I hope so. I don't know. The transmogs kind of make me think that she will in the next balance patch. But yeah, I'm sure you guys saw the rest of that. And then we have, no surprise, Gianna Ragdoll Neptus at triple S tier. The usual suspects, really. The fast, aggressive, control cleave nightmares. I'm surprised to see her a little bit lower. Some of these were on the fence, though. Some of these... just some of these with all of the different tier lists were on the fence of like, oh, they could be in this and but there's a little bit extra push it into one tier or another. But some of these were on the, as always, some of these are on the fence. So, and everyone's got different varying opinions based on different play styles. So, man, some of these really nasty on the top of my wish list units up here. This is a nasty unit too. Oh my goodness. This is a nasty one. This is a nasty one. Depending on who you ask, some of these units are crazy double S, triple S tier units. But And also this one, depending on who you ask, is lower down than he has been. But we see some of the... Really not surprised too much to see. She's so close to being like at least S tier. They just got to change a couple words in her passive. Well, they could change a couple words in his passive and he'd be S tier or triple S tier or whatever as well. But just little tweaks can make these units so much better or worse. There's a lot of varying opinions on Veramos, which is, yeah, sometimes it's interesting to see all these different opinions and how, because it's not necessarily, like something could be in S tier, but not necessarily everyone, like sometimes things are like everyone agrees that it's in this tier or one of these two tiers. But sometimes they're just like all over the place. Another thing that I want to mention as well is that the newer units, there were more people that declined to vote on the newer units. They were like, because there's an option that says I don't know. So a lot of people for the newer units just declined to vote on what they thought because they didn't have enough information, which I think is good. This way, the people that have seen the unit actually being played with or have the unit or whatever are more likely to vote, and the people that would skew the data incorrectly are just conceding their vote on that specific unit. So, and then this is the crazy tier list. Let's try that again. Now we have the consolidated tier list with every single element all in one, which is just a giant mess and very hard to see most of anything. That's why I put everything into its own specific ones for each element, and then this giant catastrophe of a, well, we can see who the triple S tier ones, you can see who the double S tier ones, and then everything after that is just these giant messes of, on the bright side, there's nothing that's unanimously like D tier or F tier, so that's nice. Everything has its, for the most part, everything has its uses. Again, there's nothing D tier or F tier, so that's nice. Even though some people voted some things into those, there's enough votes for the middle ground tiers or the higher levels or whatever that, or even the B and C tiers, that it pumped them into those different tiers. Because I'm sure some people, for some of these units, they're like, no, this is an F tier unit, this is an F tier unit. Like, there's not very, it's hard to make things F tier units. It's not impossible, it's just harder to make things F tier units. But anyway, this is just food for thought for Comtos. Next time they want to think about what things might need to be still addressed in future balance patches, I suppose. Anyway, that's it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I will leave, I think I'll leave a link to one of these or all of these tier lists or whatever in the description. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you have a little bit better understanding, if you are new or returning, as to what units you should possibly pick from the 9th year anniversary NAT-5 scroll. Anyway, that's it for this one. See you as always in the next one.